Hello there, and welcome back to our Orlando time-lapse series. In today's episode, we will continue the work on our railroad station and start constructing the two atriums on the left and right of the railroad station. And that brings me also to today's topic. And I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about the ground floor and the function of this railroad station. What purpose it has in the park itself. And the first thing that comes to mind is of course that the railroad station is the main transport system in the park. In Orlando there are three railroad stations. So it's of course this one in the main street. The next station is in Frontierland and the third station is in Fantasyland. And the railroad performs basically this round loop around the park. And I don't know, I think that it's just one of the most charming and iconic rides that there are, and the most classic one, I think. And it's also great to get a big overview about the park itself. So when you would visit this park for your first time, then this would be the ride for you, to give you a general overview about the park. And while you're riding this ride, you of course see not only those three stations, but in between also the other areas of the park. You have of course so many access there, viewing access, that this ride makes you basically, excites you for that, to later then exit the railroad and go to this area and figure out what you saw while you were riding the railroad. And you could basically say the same here about the monorail. But the monorail, it's more in a bigger scale, you know. And also both of those transport systems, they obviously are connected in a way. So the monorail station is in a spatial relationship, in a close relationship to the railroad station. So that you can just walk over and switch your transport option there. And again, you could also say the same thing about the ferry boat. So all those three transport systems, they all centralize on the park entrance of the Magic Kingdom. And when I think about that, I have always this thought connection again about the garden cities and what we talked early on in the Anaheim time-lapse series, and this system of having a garden city and have this efficiency in your transport system, and you basically travel through different districts to get your location where you want to go. And there's this inner connection to Epcot. But again, back to our railroad station, there's also a secondary function of this railroad station. And it's basically hidden in the basement of it. And when you look on blueprints of it, you will see that there is like this place where you can rent a stroller to use for your child. And therefore there are some storage rooms to storage them. Not only that, you also have this connection where you can basically from the left tunnel go to the right tunnel if you're a staff member, I believe. And I also believe on the right side of the tunnel there's basically just an opening where you can go directly straight into the basement of the railroad station. And from there it leads you basically to the back side of the railroad station, and also where you enter the main street itself. As I said previous, you have those two atriums on the left and on the right side. And they are basically this space, this open space, where you have a ramp go up or down and entrance or exit the railroad station itself. So there I'm not completely certain how you board the actual railroad itself, if you use those ramps or if you just go up this little emporium on the backside and go through the station building and to board the railroad in this way. I could imagine that people with disabilities might use that ramp to board the railroad. So maybe it's a little bit mixed here in which way you basically board the railroad. But I just wanted to say that those two entrances to those atriums, they are also in the basement. So that was one reason why I decided also to do the interior, to have this experience later on where you can maybe see people going down those ramps or up, and you see everything blend into each other. But the main reason why I decided to include the interior of the station and the basement and pretty much everything there was the ability that you have now this guest camera, where you can enter this guest mode, where you can roam around in your park and just look around, and you have a different angle of view there. And especially when you try to zoom in. So basically the field of view changes then, and you get a much nearer picture, you know, you don't have this wide angle lens. It's especially great, I think, for architecture scenes or details, and they will pop into your eye much better then. You have this effect, at least I have that everything looks a little bit more appealing because it's not so far stretched like this view, like you see it here in the footage. In a moment I will show you how this looks. I believe I slow down here the footage so that you actually can see that. And I mean, it's great to walk through those open doors and enter the station there, and you can basically zoom in and out and see all those little details, you know. I mean, this is also great just to create some Easter eggs maybe, so that you don't see them when you're basically in your orbit camera, but when you then go into your park as a guest, go through a specific area, and maybe you catch something that you would otherwise would not see. And I think especially for the railroad station, since it's the first thing that people see, this is a really great feature to have. And I mean, you could even extend that feature and add maybe the possibility to, so that you could actually buy some drinks or food in the park. And basically you see then when you look down, you see that your character has that in their hands. And maybe even you could throw that into the bins. And maybe you could also sit down on benches. I mean, there is so much possibility there to make out of this theme park sim this little roleplay experience. And I just thought maybe this would be the multiplayer mode for the game. Since they don't offer any multiplayer mode where you could actually build in real time with your friends in a lobby. So you only have this system where you can basically save it on your end, and somebody else can open it then on their end and see what you did. But I think it would be much cooler if you build a park and then you could join a lobby with your friends, and then each friend of yours has a separate avatar they made, and then you could stroll around with them in the park and actually experience the park, ride those rides, buy food, buy drinks, and just have fun in this park. And I just think there is so much potential there, you know. I can also remember that many games offer like this Twitch integration where your chat that's watching your stream that could actually interact with your park that you built. So maybe they could be guests roaming around in your park, and when they write something in the chat, you would see a little pop-up above their heads in the game. And I mean, there's so much that could be there, you know. I mean, it's always very easy to say something like that, not being a game developer here, but I don't know how difficult something like that is to make. But in general, just this idea, I think you have so much potential just there. Especially since Frontier has this really uniqueness about their game. And you know, there are different player types out there. Not every player is the same. Some may want to play their game alone, and some may to play it only if there's a multiplayer mode. And I just think you could extend this audience by just adding some features that I don't think are too difficult to implement here. But the benefits of that would extend this audience and make it accessible to those people. And I think much more people would buy your game then also. Because I have childhood memories, I don't want to get too private here, but I remember that back then it was so much joy about those games. like Roller Coaster Tycoon 1, 2 and 3. Also like those zoo tycoon games, you know. And I think I made like a little zoo back then, and I showed it to my mother. And it was just this childish enjoyment about showing something that I made to a person that I knew obviously pretty well. And this enjoyment about seeing their reaction and see them asking about how did you this or how did you that area, and just this interaction, you know, this social thing. In this experience, I think you can make something out of it, you know, because otherwise you only build your park in the game and management it. And then you could have this more socializing element in the game. And the park is not only there because you build it and now you manage it, but you also experience it. And this aspect is pretty much overlooked since we now have this guest camera. But let's get back to our build. So as you saw, I built on this 2 atriums, and you see that there's this ramp, you know. And the question was if we could make it workable, you know, since we have now this new path system tool. And later on, probably not in this episode, I laid down a path in there and tried to make it work. And the biggest problem here is just that the path width, like in the prequel, is limited to 4 meters. So the width of this path is of course not 4 meters, it's about 2.50 meters, I think. Therefore, I would have to use queues, because queues are, the minimum sizes of queues are 2 meters. And then I don't know if it's even possible to make them work. I mean, for one side it could work because it's the entrance queue. On the other side, since it's the exit, I can make it work there, you know. And I even tried now with the new tools we have in the game to lay a 4 meter path in there in the right height, and then to use this edit mode where you can basically select the vertexes on that path and track them, the borders of those paths. And it's just very terrible because there are so many paths around it. I mean, we have this path that's on the railroad station itself. Then we have the path, those 3 paths that are sloped in that atrium. And then you have the exit path that's in the basement. And this makes the whole thing, of course, a bit terrific to place down. For now, I left it. And I also had this idea because I noticed when you multi-select something, you can actually select the path as well. So maybe when we track this form out of there, we can make this path on a separate location to just lay it in there, model it in, and then move it back into it. Maybe it works then. I don't know, I have to try. I just don't know why they did the path tool in this form, because I think when you could have this vertex mode and could adjust just those vertexes with the advanced move tool, then you could place exactly those vertexes on the exact points you need. And then it would be basically like placing down a flat surface in a 3D application like 3ds Max or Maya or Blender, and you just make simple forms and you just adjust those vertices, have just those planes. Maybe you could tell the game on all those surfaces people could walk. I don't know, maybe it could work in some form of that, because otherwise if I only have this tool where I could move those vertices around by freeform, they will just snap to each path that's the closest to them, and it's just a mess. I mean, you have to try that out. It's just, and since there's also no height indicator, how high the path actually is, and with that I mean how high it actually is, that you can pinpoint it to the centimeter. I mean, if it's just in half a meter or a meter, it's just too rough. I need it exactly on the centimeter exactly. Otherwise I get really strange things happening later on. I mean, that's also what many people encountered when figuring out a path with the path system, because you have this little inaccuracies when you try to do a main street where you have the boardwalk that's a little bit higher than the actual street itself. I mean, in Planet Coaster 1 there was nothing like that, not even close. You only had those sleeky lines that you could place down. When you had luck, they fitted exactly where you want them to be, but in the first game I only did fake paths, because you just can't do a esplanade there. Now you can do it, but again, we need some fine-tuning here. But maybe in upcoming updates, I think they will fine-tune that and maybe get rid of all limitations there. Especially lowering the limit of the path width. Then I think it could be much easier to place it down. So for those atriums, you have of course those colored planks or columns that define this atrium. I mean, it's very Victorian-esque and you have lots of ornaments there. And I thought those window shutters, they are just perfect for that, to give it more detail in the horizontal axis. Yeah, in a moment you see me also doing this, those trim on the top, and I even place a gutter in there. When it rains, it basically goes then down through the drainage and down to the ground. And I think this detail is very cool that we have it in the game, and it works especially good on all those things where you have a, what we call in Germany, a Attika, and you need to do the Entwässerung. What a lovely word. And also, what was very important here is the color choice of the screen. You know, it's very distinct minty green, you know. It's also very similar to that color that I used on the Anaheim station, and where people still complain a little bit. I mean, not complain, but note that the roof color is actually green. In reality, the roof color is a mixture between a bluish color, I think, and a little bit whitish, I think. And maybe at some point I will change that. But this greenish color is very distinct, you know, especially here on Orlando, where you have this same color on the roof. And so I try to mimic that color here on those wooden columns. Also, very important here, of course, the distance between those columns. Since there are a specific amount of openings, and so this advanced move tool with where you can basically move a certain piece and you know exactly how much you moved it. It was really golden here, this feature, and it helped me tremendously in spacing them out in the right distance to each other. So I think this will conclude today's episode. We made quite a decent progress, I think. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe, like or comment, join our Discord server, watch my other videos about Anaheim or Orlando, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.